In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 24th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Miami, Ohio versus Eastern Michigan. Miami heads into Ypsilanti on a cold late February night feeling less like a cute surprise and more like that boss level you keep fighting and never quite crack it, yet it just keeps full health the whole time. The Redhawks are still perfect, sitting at 27-0 overall and 14-0 in league action, carrying a national ranking and the kind of confidence that only comes from everyone giving you their best shot for months and you still walking out with the win. That does not happen by accident. Their whole identity this season has been about connected basketball, guys who have played together, trust each other, and make the extra pass that turns a decent look into a clean one, and it shows in how often they create easy scores instead of needing hero ball. Even the one big gut punch, losing junior point guard Evan Ipsaro to a torn ACL back in December, did not knock them off their path. A lot of teams lose their lead guard and need weeks to figure out who does what, who runs the show, who takes the late clock shots. Miami basically shrugged, tweaked the rotation, moved responsibilities around, and kept slicing teams up with the same poise, just with a slightly different melody. That kind of response says a lot about the culture in the locker room, the staff on the sideline, and the way everyone buys into something bigger than one player. Eastern Michigan, on the other hand, is living a very different season. The Eagles sit at 10-18 overall and 4-11 in the conference, near the bottom of the standings, exactly where a lot of preseason conversations feared they might end up if things did not break their way. They are not helpless, not even close, but they often have to work twice as hard to get the same kind of clean looks that Miami seems to generate naturally. Forward Mohamed Habab has become the kind of frontcourt piece who gives them a real backbone, playing heavy minutes, battling on the glass, and forcing defenses to respect him around the paint. You can see it in their recent games, where he is stuffing the box score while trying to drag them into deeper water against stronger opponents. The bigger picture, though, is about how these two styles clash over 40 minutes. Miami wants to keep playing to its strengths, sharing the ball, attacking matchups, and trusting that their depth and shot quality will eventually stretch any small lead into something more comfortable. Eastern Michigan needs this game to be a grind, a scrap, a night where effort and home energy can slow the machine down just enough to keep things interesting, especially with a home crowd that will be fired up to take a swing at an unbeaten, ranked visitor. The problem for the Eagles is that when you compare how easily Miami can find rhythm on offense with how hard Eastern has to fight for long stretches, the gap tends to show itself late, when tired legs meet a team that just keeps coming in waves. Honestly, with no fresh major injuries beyond the already known absence of Ipsaro, and with Miami repeatedly proving they can separate from league foes when it matters, this shapes up like another spot where the unbeaten side is more likely to stretch things beyond a modest cushion by the final horn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Miami, Ohio Redhawks to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total for this matchup is clearly influenced by Miami's reputation for explosive offense, all those high-scoring games, highlights flying around on social media, and the general sense that any Redhawks game might turn into a track meet at any moment. It is easy for fans and bettors alike to see an unbeaten team that piles up points and instantly picture a track-style shootout, but the flow of a college game is almost always more subtle than that. Miami games feel wild because of the runs, those sudden bursts where they hang 10 or 12 points on you before you even realize what happened. That does not mean every minute is played at breakneck speed. There are still plenty of possessions where they are patient, working mismatches, using the clock, and being content to take what the defense gives instead of forcing the issue just for style points. Coaches love wins more than they love fireworks, especially with a perfect record on the line, so there is always a part of them that will take a solid, controlled performance over a reckless shootout. Eastern Michigan lives in a more grounded scoring world. Their typical game tends to settle into that old-school college rhythm where every possession matters, cuts are sharp, and points feel earned rather than gifted. Even when they get good nights from Habab and the supporting cast, the Eagles often find themselves in scores that are closer to traditional MAC battles than the video game totals people picture when they think of high-octane teams. That style does not disappear just because an unbeaten opponent walks into the building. Here is the thing that really tilts the feel of the total. You have a home underdog that knows its best chance to hang around is to value the ball, get something out of most trips, and avoid letting the tempo spiral into chaos. You have a road favorite that has shown it can cover even when the pace is not blistering, because their efficiency and spacing let them win on quality rather than sheer volume of shots. Put that together, and the most likely script leans more toward a game where both sides are selective, the clock keeps moving, and we get fewer possessions than the hype around Miami's scoring might suggest. The crowd will be loud, the energy will be high, but the actual scoring rhythm can still feel more measured, more tactical, and just a bit lower than what people expect if they only glance at the highlight clips. Given the known injury situation, with Ipsaro still out but no sudden new absences cutting into rotations, and the contrast between Miami's reputation and Eastern's tendency to pull games back toward something more controlled, this matchup looks more like a spot where the final total sneaks under the narrative of a pure shootout rather than blowing past it. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Duke versus Notre Dame. This matchup has big brand energy written all over it, even if the nameplates are carrying very different vibes right now. Duke is rolling through the season with the kind of record that looks like a preseason magazine cover, sitting at 25-2 overall and 13-1 in conference play, sitting right at the top of the Atlantic Coast Conference mountain. They are not just winning, they are stretching teams out, scoring in the low 80s on average while holding opponents in the low 60s, which is the basketball version of walking into the gym, picking up the ball, and quietly breaking everyone's spirit without a lot of trash talk. The fun part is that Duke is not just some run-and-gun outfit that hopes shots fall. They guard, they close out hard, they rebound in traffic, and they take away first options so you are stuck trying to manufacture something late in the shot clock while a 6'8" defender is in your jersey, and that kind of pressure adds up over 40 minutes, especially for a team that is still learning how to win. When you combine that with a deep rotation that can bring fresh athletes off the bench without much drop-off, you get that slow squeeze effect where games start close and then you look up with 8 minutes to go and the lead has quietly ballooned. On the other side, Notre Dame has had a grind of a year. They are sitting down in the standings at 12-15, 3-11 in Atlantic Coast Conference play, more in survivor mode than in contender mode right now. They have flashes, they have real talent, and they have a coach who clearly knows what he wants this program to become, but the path there has not been clean. Injuries have hit key spots, chemistry keeps getting re-scrambled, and what was supposed to be a step-forward season has turned into a hold-it-together and figure out who we are kind of campaign. The backcourt picture tells a lot of the story. Marcus Burton came into the year as the engine, a high-usage guard who had been carrying a huge chunk of the scoring and playmaking load. And then the ankle injury and surgery took that away for an extended stretch. Notre Dame responded by patching things together, even dipping into the football program for Mark Zachary to help at guard, which is a cool story but also a reminder of how thin things got at the point of attack. The result is an offense that can look very clean when shots are falling and the ball is moving, then suddenly go quiet when a young ball handler gets squeezed by pressure and the first read is gone. Up front, Duke's edge in size and depth is hard to ignore, even after losing reserve big man Ifeanyi Fochukwu for the season with a knee injury. They still throw waves of length at you, they contest everything at the rim, and they are more than comfortable turning missed shots into quick strikes the other way. Notre Dame, meanwhile, is dealing with the emotional and physical hit of Kebanji's season-ending knee injury and the long-term absence of freshman center Tommy Aneman, which shifts even more responsibility onto players like Carson Tout to anchor the glass and handle physical matchups. That is a lot of weight for a team that already has a small margin for error. Honestly, this is where the style clash matters as much as the numbers. Duke wants to play confident, almost casual basketball, where they flow into early offense, trust their talent, and let the pressure build possession by possession. Notre Dame wants to slow your heartbeat, use spacing, pick and roll angles, and smart cutting to stay right there with you. The problem is that it is very hard to keep your pace slow and your decisions clean when every mistake against this Duke group turns into an open three or a dunk going the other way. You can feel that snowball forming before it shows up on the scoreboard. There is also the psychology of the number itself. When a favorite is laying a big spread, the question is less who is better and more, will they stay locked in long enough to finish the job? This Duke team has mostly answered that by burying teams instead of coasting, which is what you want to see if you are backing them. They have been remarkably consistent against teams below them in the Atlantic Coast Conference food chain, rarely allowing a one-possession game in the final minutes when talent and depth are this tilted in their favor. Notre Dame does have that home crowd, nothing to lose, energy in spots, and you can absolutely see a scenario where a noisy Purcell Pavilion, a couple of early threes from Braden Shrewsbury or Cole Serta, and the confidence of Jalen Harrelson turn this into a scrap for a while. But then you remember that over 40 minutes, depth, health, and shot creation tend to decide things. Duke has more reliable answers in all three categories right now, and that usually shows up most clearly when you are asking a favorite to stretch out a margin instead of just squeaking by. So when you put it all together, the talent gap, the injury situations, the way Duke has handled business against teams in Notre Dame's neighborhood, and the way Notre Dame's offense can stall against high-level length and pressure, the path that shows up most often is pretty clear. As our first pick for this matchup, the Duke Blue Devils to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Duke's season-long profile is that of a team that lives in the 80s more often than not, and they do it without playing at a breakneck pace. They just score efficiently, they get good looks early in possessions, and they put you on the free throw line once you start reaching. When you shoot it that well and you are that comfortable creating mismatches, you do not need a track meet to light up the scoreboard. Notre Dame might not have the same firepower, but they are not exactly playing rock fight basketball either. Earlier in the season, they were sitting in the mid-70s per game, with a nice balance of threes and paint touches, and their rebounding edge on the glass has been one of the few statistical bright spots. That rebounding piece matters for the total because second chance points are sneaky little bonus possessions, and the Irish have been strong enough on the boards to keep that part of their identity even with the injuries. Here is the thing, even with key guys out or limited, Notre Dame still has enough skill on the perimeter to punish lazy closeouts. Harrelson can get downhill and finish through contact. Shrewsbury is fully capable of getting hot from deep. And Serta is the classic, "You forgot about me in the corner and now the whole tone of the game just changed" shooter. If they are going to hang around, it probably involves them putting up a more efficient offensive night than their recent box scores suggest. On the Duke side, a lot of their games follow a familiar scoring pattern. Things might start a little slow, they feel out matchups, then in the middle chunks of the first and second halves the offense hits that smooth, connected groove and runs off 10-2 type stretches that blow games open. When that happens, totals can accelerate in a hurry because once the lead is comfortable, defenses on both ends relax just a touch, rotations get lighter, and transition opportunities pop up more often. Garbage time, weirdly, often helps the total too. If Duke does what they usually do and builds a big cushion, you can get those last 4 or 5 minutes where the starters are on the bench, the defensive intensity drops, and young guys are out there hunting their own shot a little bit. That is not selfish, that is just human. You get quick threes early in the clock, backdoor cuts that no one really wants to foul on, and suddenly a game that felt like it was going to land in a middling scoring range starts creeping higher. Of course, there is always the risk that Notre Dame's offense just does not cooperate. In some of their losses, they have gone through long scoring droughts where the spacing is fine but the shots simply do not fall. And turnovers in those moments can turn into instant points for the other side instead of extended half-court possessions. If that version of the Irish shows up, it puts more pressure on Duke to carry the scoring load almost by themselves. The counter to that worry is that Duke is good enough offensively to drag a total upward even if the opponent is a bit stuck in the mud for stretches. When you combine their efficiency, their three-point volume, and their ability to live at the line, you get a team that can still push a game into a higher scoring pocket as long as the underdog is not completely frozen. And Notre Dame, for all their flaws, usually finds at least one meaningful scoring stretch, especially at home. So you end up with a picture where the favorite naturally wants to play an efficient, high-scoring style, the underdog has enough shooting to throw a couple of punches of its own, and the game script, whether it is competitive or tilts toward a comfortable margin, tends to favor points rather than a defensive slog. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. St. Louis versus Dayton. St. Louis walks into this one with the quiet swagger of a team that knows exactly who it is and exactly what it wants to be remembered for in March and beyond. A record like 25-2 in league play is not an accident, and it is not just hot shooting for a few weeks. It is habits, layers of structure, and a group that has heard every opponent's best shot and kept standing. They score at a pace that feels more like a track meet than a half-court rock fight, yet their identity is not only about buckets, it is about stacking small advantages, one possession at a time, until the scoreboard starts to look rude late in the second half. This group has already sent a pretty loud message in this exact matchup, putting a lopsided result on Dayton back in late January that still sticks in Flyers fans' memories every time someone brings up the standings. That earlier game was not just about shots falling, it was about how St. Louis spread the floor, moved the ball, and turned every Dayton mistake into a run out or an open look, the kind of script that makes a home crowd sound a little stunned. Now they carry that same formula on the road, which is where contenders show their teeth, and their profile actually travels really well. Efficient offense, elite shooting, and a defense that forces bad decisions without needing wild gambles. Dayton's building is no joke, though, and that matters. UD Arena is one of those places where the student section feels like it is right on top of you. The band never seems to stop, and a couple of early threes can make the floor feel like it is shaking under a visiting team's feet. The Flyers have been tough at home, piling up wins in this gym and coming into this one off a stretch where they have squeezed 3 victories out of a brutal part of the schedule. They share the ball, they run good stuff, and when their energy is right, you can almost see the confidence grow with each defensive stop. But here is the thing, the very strengths that make Dayton dangerous in this building line up almost perfectly with what St. Louis loves to attack. The Billikens feast on teams that want to play fast enough to trade blows but do not quite have the same depth or two-way consistency, and over 40 minutes that gap shows up on the glass, in transition, and in late clock situations when the ball needs to find a good shot under pressure. St. Louis has already shown they can jump on Dayton's defense by stretching it side to side, then punishing closeouts, and they have the kind of rotation that can survive foul trouble or a cold stretch without losing their identity. Even in their recent comeback win against VCU, they showed how quickly they can flip a game, turning a sluggish start into a second-half avalanche once they settled in. So when you zoom out from the noise, the storyline tilts toward the team that has been more stable, more ruthless, and more comfortable living with a target on its back. Dayton can absolutely throw a punch here, especially early with the crowd behind them, but over time, the team that has already handled them once, that is winning both with scoring bursts and with stops, is better built to create separation again, even in a hostile environment. As our first pick for this matchup, the St. Louis Billikens to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. This matchup almost begs you to expect fireworks again, especially if you watched that first meeting and saw St. Louis run away with it in an up-tempo show that felt like an NBA Jam session for long stretches. When fans remember a game like that, the default instinct is to expect more of the same, more pace, more threes, and another scoreboard that looks like a video game. But rematches, especially in late February conference play, have a way of turning into something a little different, a little smarter, and, honestly, a little meaner on the defensive end. Both coaching staffs have a full game of tape to chew on. St. Louis saw how quickly things flipped once they locked in, and Dayton saw exactly what happens when they let the Billikens dictate space, tempo, and rhythm. In round 2, that usually means more targeted matchups, more deliberate possessions, and less of the wild, free-flowing stuff that inflates scoring. The Flyers know they cannot afford to let St. Louis get downhill and comfortable early again, not if they want this to be a rock fight instead of a track meet. St. Louis, for its part, has every reason to be a little more pragmatic too. A team sitting on a special record this late in the season does not need style points. It needs control, and control often means trusting its defense and half-court execution rather than chasing another track meet on the road. They have one of the stingiest shooting defenses around, shrinking driving lanes, contesting threes, and cleaning the glass so thoroughly that opponents rarely get second chances. That profile tends to drag games into a more methodical rhythm once the initial adrenaline wears off. Dayton's numbers tell a different story than that last blowout suggests. On the season they score at a solid clip, but they are not some reckless run-and-gun outfit, and they have had nights where good defenses have turned their offense into a lot of late-clock possessions and contested jumpers. When that happens, even at home, the game naturally slows, there are more empty trips, and the total creeps down possession by possession. Add in the fact that their rotation is not endless, and you can imagine a scenario where both teams lean on shorter benches and trust defensive effort over gambles, especially with conference tournament seeding on the line. Head-to-head trends also whisper a different story than one wild box score. Outside of that recent outlier, these two have played plenty of games that landed in a much more moderate scoring range. Games where every cut was bumped, every screen was fought through, and every clean look felt earned. When officials tighten up or the ball just does not fly the same way it did a few weeks earlier, long offensive rebounds turn into reset clocks, and the scoreboard moves in smaller, slower increments. So while the surface narrative screams points, 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 the underlying ingredients here look a lot more like a physical Atlantic 10 rematch, where both coaches are more interested in getting the next stop than the next SportsCenter clip. If St. Louis leans into its defense and Dayton focuses on avoiding another avalanche, possessions should stretch, edges should grind, and the final number is more likely to land beneath the lofty expectation than to soar past it again. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Cincinnati versus Texas Tech. Lubbock at night turns into its own little basketball planet, and this matchup drops Cincinnati right into the middle of that orbit as the so-called underdog that does not really act like one anymore. Texas Tech shows up with that shiny top 15 profile and a record around 20-7, all backed by a loud home crowd that loves nothing more than reminding visitors what they walked into. Cincinnati walks in at 15-12, and on paper it looks like a team that should just be happy to hang around, but the recent body of work says something completely different. The Bearcats have started to play like that friend who was quiet all night at the poker table, then suddenly rakes in 3 huge pots in a row and nobody wants to see them in another hand. Allen Fieldhouse is one of the most sacred home courts in college hoops, and Cincinnati did not just survive there, it walked out with a comfortable double-digit win that snapped Kansas' decades-long streak of avoiding double-digit home losses to unranked teams. That kind of result is not noise, it is a big neon sign that this group is not scared of banners on the wall or names on the jersey. Then you stack on a 30-point style road demolition at Kansas State, a game that had home fans in paper bags and coaches questioning effort, and you start to see a team that has found its mean streak on the road, not just at home. Here is the thing, Cincinnati is not winning these games because it is wildly hot from 3 or living off lucky whistles. It is winning because the identity travels. That front court with Mustafa Thiam and Baba Miller gives them length, rim protection, and a physical presence that makes every cut and post-up feel like work for the opponent. The defense grades out among the better units in the country, allowing opponents to live in the mid-60s on average, and that is not an accident when you watch how they sit down in a stance and contest everything around the lane. It looks ugly sometimes, and honestly, that is exactly how they want it. On the other side, Texas Tech used to feel like a highlight reel waiting to happen every night, with an offense cruising in the low 80s and humming around 40% from deep, and a superstar forward in JT Toppin cleaning up every broken possession at the rim. Toppin was the sun in their solar system, giving them 20-plus points and double-digit boards on a nightly basis, and turning every pick and roll into a decision the defense usually regretted. Now he is out for the season with a torn ACL, and the whole structure has to shift, with guards taking on more creation, role players being bumped up a chair in the rotation, and the offense losing that reliable safety valve when the possession bogs down. Without that interior hammer, Texas Tech still wins games, but the margin for error looks thinner, especially against a team that actually lives for wrestling matches in the paint. Cincinnati's bigs can body up on drivers, chase rebounds in traffic, and force Texas Tech's smaller lineup to generate everything off the dribble and from the perimeter instead of getting easy deep catches. That is tiring over 40 minutes, particularly when every cut is bumped and every screen is met with real contact. It is not that Texas Tech suddenly turned bad, it is that the gap between these two shrinks a lot once you remove the best interior player from the floor and replace him with committee minutes instead of star power. Cincinnati also brings a certain emotional swagger into this spot that matters more than people admit. You come off a statement win at Kansas, another on the road at Kansas State. You know your defense is good enough to win anywhere, and that belief shows up in how you execute late. Even if Texas Tech throws an early haymaker in front of its home crowd, this Bearcats group has already proven it can take that punch, regroup, and keep chipping away. When you give that kind of resilient road profile a cushion as an underdog, the story you are telling is not about whether Cincinnati belongs. It is about how many times it can hang around long enough to make everyone sweating a favorite ticket very uncomfortable. As our first pick for this matchup, the Cincinnati Bearcats to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Most people still picture Texas Tech as that track meet team that casually hangs 80-plus on anyone, bombs threes, and sprints in transition at every chance. And to be fair, a lot of their season box scores support that image. The key detail hiding in plain sight is that so much of that offensive power was built with JT Toppin anchoring things, dragging extra bodies into the paint, and opening space for shooters by simply existing as a constant threat at the rim. Once he went down in that loss to Arizona State, the tempo and feel of their game shifted, not overnight into a slugfest team, but into a group that has to work harder for every good look and cannot rely on easy dump-offs to bail out late clock possessions. Cincinnati, meanwhile, already prefers games that look like slow-burning dramas instead of action movies. Their averages sit in that low 70s scoring range on offense and mid-60s allowed on defense, and the way they guard, especially in the half court, drags opponents into longer possessions whether they intended to play that way or not. The recent road run shows it clearly. Kansas, with all that offensive firepower and a packed home arena, still found itself grinding through possessions and stuck in the high 60s. Kansas State, in a different style of game, still watched its own scoring dry up while Cincinnati methodically pulled away. There is a pattern there. The Bearcats do not just want stops, they want games to feel like they are being played in mud. Injuries on the Cincinnati side quietly support a slower, more controlled kind of night too. Jalen Haynes, the transfer big who was supposed to give them another interior scoring option, remains out indefinitely with that lower body issue, so the staff leans even more on defense, structure, and selective offense rather than trying to trade baskets possession after possession. Sean Abaev has been banged up as well, missing recent games with that leg injury and still not fully back, which trims some wing scoring juice and again nudges Cincinnati toward valuing every half-court trip instead of trying to turn this into a shootout. When your rotation is bruised like that, you naturally shorten it a bit, slow the pace a touch, and trust your defense, especially on the road. Texas Tech is dealing with its own version of that reality without Toppin, only on the other side of the ball. The guards can absolutely fill up a scoreboard, no question, but now they are asked to shoulder even more responsibility, handle more creation, and often attack against a set Cincinnati defense that has legitimate size at the rim. That usually leads to more pick and roll, more resets, more probing, and fewer of those clean, early clock threes everyone loves to clip for social media. Even when the shots do fall, the process is a bit more deliberate, and over the course of 40 minutes, that trims a handful of possessions off the game. Big 12 basketball late in February has its own personality, and it is rarely wide open for long stretches. Teams know each other's plays, the scouting reports are as thick as phone books, and every cut, flare screen, and ghost screen has already been shown 3 times on film that week. Coaches tighten rotations, whistle every detail in the half court, and quietly accept that an ugly 68-64 type win is just as beautiful as a high-scoring blowout when you are chasing seeding. Add travel, a physical Cincinnati defense, and a Texas Tech team still rebalancing itself without its star big, and you get a recipe that leans toward a more controlled scoring environment. Public memory tends to lag behind the current version of a team. People remember the high-scoring highlights, the 80-point nights, the early-season non-conference fireworks, and carry that picture forward into late-season conference grinders that do not really behave the same way. Here, the matchup sets up for longer possessions, bruising drives that end in free throws instead of fast breaks, and enough contested jumpers that both offenses have to scrap for every clean look. Points will come, they always do with this talent on the floor, but they are far more likely to come in a steady trickle than a flood. For a full game total, that subtle shift from sprint to controlled jog matters a lot more than most people think. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. North Carolina State versus Virginia. When NC State heads into John Paul Jones Arena, it is not just another road game. It feels more like walking into a pressure cooker that has been slowly heating up all season. You have a team that loves to play fast, push the ball, and fire away with confidence, and they are stepping into a building where the crowd is right on top of you and every mistake gets amplified a little bit more. Virginia on the other side leans into that. They thrive on those long, patient possessions, the kind that make opponents feel like they are stuck in traffic behind a slow car with no passing lane. Instead of racing with NC State, Virginia is happy to grind out each trip, get into their sets, and then crash the glass with purpose. That rebounding edge is not just a number, it is a mindset, and it showed the first time these two met when Virginia controlled the boards and walked out of Raleigh with a comfortable win that never really felt like a fluke. Honestly, that first matchup still hangs over this one a bit. NC State knows how bad it feels when their high-octane offense suddenly looks ordinary, especially when they are limited to one shot and then jogging back on defense while Virginia calmly walks the ball up. Virginia proved in that game that they can turn what is usually a track meet into something much more methodical, and that kind of role reversal can get into a team's head. On the road, when the shots do not fall early and the building gets louder, that frustration tends to snowball. Here is the thing, Virginia does not need to play perfect to make this work, they just need to stay themselves. They do not give the ball away much, they usually win the rebounding battle, and they make teams work for every decent look. Over 40 minutes, that kind of constant, controlled pressure wears on a team that wants rhythm and tempo. What often starts as a close, feisty game can slowly tilt as Virginia stacks small advantages. A key stop here, a second chance there, and suddenly that narrow margin widens late. As our first pick for this matchup, the Virginia Cavaliers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Scoring in this matchup feels like a tug of war between reputation and reality. On paper, you think points, and plenty of them. NC State loves to run, loves to push the pace, and when they get rolling, it can feel like you blink and they have strung together a quick 8 or 10 points. Virginia can absolutely put the ball in the basket as well, especially at home where their offense tends to be more comfortable and more confident. But the way a game looks in the box score and the way it actually plays out on the floor can be very different things. Virginia has a habit of quietly tightening the screws on defense. They contest shots, they wall off the lane, and then they end possessions with the rebound, so teams rarely get those easy putbacks that inflate a total. That is a huge deal against a team like NC State that usually feeds off extra chances and quick swings in momentum. Let me explain why that matters so much here. When the first meeting between these teams wrapped up, the final score came in well lower than what many people probably pictured going in. It was not because both offenses suddenly forgot how to play. It was because Virginia dictated the rhythm, stretched out possessions, and turned NC State's usual free-flowing style into something far more uncomfortable. Once that tone is set, possessions feel heavier, and every empty trip lingers a little longer in the back of a player's mind. Late in the season, especially in conference play, that kind of game script shows up a lot. Rotations get a bit shorter, coaches lean on guys they trust, and every decision is just a little more cautious because everyone understands how much each game means. That usually does not create a wild, back-and-forth scoring race. It creates long stretches where defenses win small battles, where missed shots lead to long, quiet walks back on defense instead of fireworks. There will still be runs, there always are with two capable offenses on the floor. A couple of quick threes can spark some excitement, and a few transition buckets can make it feel like the total is ready to soar. But over the full game, Virginia's ability to slow things down, control the glass, and keep NC State from living on easy second chances points more toward a scoring output that lands below what the reputations alone might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.